Hey, welcome back to That Plumbing Podcast. I'm Brandon the Plumber, and today we're going to continue our series on the anatomy of a service call. So last episode, we talked about the on-site arrival, which has to do with what you're doing before you even arrive. How do you look, smell? How do you sound to the customer? Trying to empathize from their particular point of view. And basically, we're in the house now. We know we're talking to the right person. Now, I know I said that we're going to get into diagnosing at the end of last episode, but I just want to kind of circle back because this is actually the part where you can start building the relationship with the customer. And it's important because people buy from people they trust. If you don't communicate and don't talk to them, they're not going to trust you. They have to go off of something when they're making these decisions in their head. So we had also talked about in the episode with Caesar that the best objection handling technique is to have trust with the customer in the first place. So, I mean, the definition of a great service or sales guy isn't that he can go in and overcome any objection. The signs of a good sales service guy is that they don't have many objections in the first place because they've spent the time to build that relationship and trust with the customer. They're coming from an actual pure place where they want to educate and they want to provide options and let the customer choose. And it's in the beginning of the call where this is an important question you should be asking the customer is, what is it you're planning to do today? Are you just getting this looked at, or do you want to get it fixed? And this is going to help overcome or eliminate the objection in the end with, I got to talk to my spouse, or can I think it over? You want to see in the beginning of the call, ask the customer, what is your intention in this call? Are we just getting this looked at, or are we going to get this fixed? And then that way that you know where the customer stands, you know how much time to spend on them, and then at the end of the call, if they say something like, oh, email me, or let me talk to my spouse, you understand that you lost them somewhere along the way. And we have to circle back and figure out, clarify where we're losing them at so that we can fix it and represent it. So diagnosing, and this is very crucial because the philosophy here is that you're diagnosing the entire system. You're not just fixing symptoms. So this brings us back to the three vitals of age, water quality, and water pressure. Pretty much any problem that is happening with a system can be traced back to one of those three things. Or like user error if the customer is just abusing whatever fixture, but those three things are where we start. And I had said before that what you want to do is, like, let's say a leaking angle stop. The customer shows you the angle stop. You say something pretty close to, okay, now I see the problem is I'm going to go ahead and inspect the rest of the system to make sure that nothing else is affected. Something to that effect. But basically, the way that you word it, you say it with confidence and as if that this is the next step. You're not asking the customer for permission per se. It's just, this is your process. This is how we provide great service. So I see the problem. Now I need to inspect the rest of the system to see if there are any other issues. That opens you up to your pressure conversation. You ask the customer if they have water filtration, age of the home, all of these things. So now you want to start gathering like evidence and intel on what's going on with the system. This is great because if the customer decides to follow you and talk with you, you can help build trust that entire time, trust and value by talking to the customer, getting to know them, just trying to figure out what kind of person they are so that when you're making your options towards the end, you can kind of customize it to what the customer wants. Now, one thing that's important when it comes to diagnosing, especially if the customer is following you around, you do not want to give any prices while you're diagnosing. You don't want the customer to say, oh, how much is that going to be? And then you just start, because you probably know your prices. You don't want to just start spitballing prices at them, because if we're taking multiple items and we're making a bundle, the premium option, they're not going to be paying retail price for every item. So if you got like one angle stop is going to cost a certain amount, but 7 angle stops is going to likely be a little bit cheaper. So you don't want to present problems without solutions to the customer. And if a customer is asking me for prices, I'll just straight up tell them that I really would rather wait and give you prices at the end because if you do more work, I can give you more of a discount. And I really rarely ever get pushback from that. Customer understands the idea of, more work equals lower price. Now, when it comes to talking about the diagnosing process with the customer, this is going to have to be something where you kind of figure out what works for you. Guys like Joe Coursera says, you don't say anything. Don't diagnose out loud at all. Keep the conversation strictly about the plumbing system, like the age and all that, and getting to know the customer. But it does depend on the situation, because if there's like a complex diagnosing process that's going on, like maybe a slab leak or reroutes, cartridge replacements, I like to include the customer in the diagnosing process because I'm transparent with them. I'm going through out loud what my mind is going through to get to the answers that I'm presenting to the customer. So let's take a slab leak, for example. This is one of those situations where I think it's beneficial and actually adds value by explaining the diagnosing process to the customer. So you go in and you say, okay, Mr. Customer, I see that your meter is spinning, but when I shut the water heater off at the valve up there, the meter stops. So that indicates that there is a hot side slab leak somewhere under the slab. Now, the next process will be having a leak detection to determine where the two manifolds are. So we say leak detection, but it's not to find if there's a leak or not. It's to figure out where the leak is going from one manifold to the other. So if it ends up being from the water heater to the kitchen sink, which is on the opposite side of the water heater, that's going to be a different scope of work and therefore price than if we're going from the water heater to the other side of the house. So you just you walk them through your observations so that when you present to them and they see that price, they know that it's that price because of all of these things that I described earlier. In fact, now that I think about it, I am pretty transparent with my diagnosing process if the customer's around. The crucial thing to take away, I believe, is to not give them prices and don't bring up problems without solutions. So let's say the customer leaves you to it. They go off, they do their own thing. Now you're walking through the house and you're inspecting everything and trying to find any problems. And you just so happen to pass the customer in the hallway while you're doing this. It's really important to not bring up any problems that you have come across, not until you've had a chance to come up with options and solutions for those problems. It's just like it's way more professional, and you don't want the customer to tell them that there's a problem without the solution, and then their mind starts spinning and assuming and guessing, and how much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? Can I even trust this guy to do it? You don't want that. It just makes it easier for the customer to have a problem and then, okay, there's the solution. There's no time to dwell on it. There's no time to overreact or any of those things. So not giving prices until your presentation time. Don't present problems until you have the solutions right there in front of the customer, black and white. This is your price. This is what it's going to cost to fix it. This is what's going to cost to replace it. Because if you think about it, our ability to diagnose the entire system is probably the most important skill that we have as plumbers. It's up there with either the diagnosing, that's the technical side. On the social side, it's more of building that relationship and connecting with the customer. But we cannot let the customer dictate what the problem is. We can't have them diagnosing the system. How many times have we went out to a customer's house and the customer did their Googling, their YouTubing, and you get there and they're telling you what the problem is and what they want done. And that is just a recipe for disaster. I mean, think if you went to the doctor's office and you started telling the doctor what you thought the problems were because you searched WebMD and Google and you're convinced that this is the problem and I want to get this medication. No, you're going there to pay for the doctor's expertise in the ability to diagnose what's going wrong with you. So the same thing applies to plumbing. So I would say the biggest takeaway is the utilization of the three vitals. Some actionable steps you can take if you're not doing it is you could still check the water pressure at every call, have a conversation about water filtration if you're in an area that needs it, and asked about the age of the plumbing. So how long has the customer been there? Has there been any other issues? And as far as water filtration goes, if they're walking with you through the house and you see a lot of calcium build up on the aerators, this is a great opportunity to point it out to the customer. You could kind of ask them, when's the last time you added salt to your system? And at that point, they're either going to say, last week, or, I don't have a sulfur. I don't have a filtration system. And then you can point out to them, oh, okay, that makes sense why there's so much calcium on the aerators, and kind of plant the seed for them to start thinking about water filtration. If we're talking about water heaters, you could say, well, when's the last time was your water heater flush? When was the last time the anode rod was replaced? Asking these questions, and then it's a natural way for the customer to answer. And then when they say, oh, the anode rod's never been changed or it's never been flushed, then that gives you items to add to the premium option when it comes time to present. But to kind of just sum it all up, the diagnosing really comes down to the three vitals, pressure, age, and water quality. If you want more detail on this, go to episode 5 where I talk about the three vitals in detail. Understand that if they are showing problems or symptoms, it's because there's something bigger going on. There's a root cause. And the doctor is just a great example of how all this works. Because whether or not it's your body or the plumbing, it's a system that all works together. Also, you don't want to give problems unless you have solutions. So don't really start talking about the findings of the inspection until after you went out to your truck, created your options, have everything, in black and white and service tight, whatever you use, and then you present it to the customer. I found this that was wrong, but I can remedy it with this option. The ability to diagnose accurately is one of the most valuable skills that we can provide to the customer. To find what's wrong the first time, find the root cause, and then solve it so this doesn't happen again. Don't let the customer diagnose. Take your time, and if the customer's walking with you while you do this, this is a great opportunity to build trust with the customer and also build value by kind of explaining the diagnosing process, but staying away from, like I said, presenting problems without solutions. And also, I'd just like to add that diagnosing is a service in of itself. Now, if you're just going through the house, checking everything's going off of the vitals, that's one thing. But if, say, you're going to be calling a Navient for tech support, or you've got to take tools and you got to diagnose by taking stuff apart, that is absolutely a service that must be charged for, because your time is worth money. Especially if you have to use your knowledge to help diagnose like a technical issue, should definitely be charging diagnostic fees to at least something to kind of help cover your time. And you can always just tell the customer that if they end up going with the repair, it'll be applied towards the overall cost. Also, when it comes to drain lines, if this customer has a stopped up drain and you're trying to clear it, you're using the camera, using the cable, and ultimately you find out that the line is collapsed and is not repairable, all of that work that you did counts as diagnostics towards finding out that ultimately they need their line replaced. And if you'd like to learn how I structure my drain calls so that I cover my time, go back to episode 3, the drain call process. So diagnosing, the most crucial skill that we can have other than communicating. We're going to go in there, find the problem, find the cause of the problem, and solve it for good. That's the key. You don't want callbacks. You don't want to be going back every 6 months or something because you're not diagnosing properly. All right, so I think that does it for today. The podcast just reached over 500 downloads across all episodes, so really appreciate you guys listening. It's pretty awesome that people seem to be getting value from this. I believe I figured out how to have someone call in and record it and then be on the podcast. So if you're interested in discussing this stuff or you have questions or whatever, email me at brandon@thatplumbingpodcast.com. Next episode, we'll be getting into option building and presenting. So it'll be a fun episode. Until then, hope everyone has a great day, and I'll talk to y'all later.